Hey everyone, I'm your host, Ricky Shockley with MedSpa Magic Marketing, and this is MedSpa Success Strategies, where practice owners come to discover strategies and tactics that help them better market and manage their practices so they can grow, improve profitability, and have greater impact for themselves, their teams, their patients, and their communities. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Winkler. She's the founder and CEO of Lux Med Spa and Wellness Center in Sarasota, Florida, and the founder of Lux Wink Growth Consultants. Ashley's perspective is different from most guests as she's a non-provider owner. She doesn't come from a clinical background. She built her practice entirely from the business side. She helps other owners improve profitability, operations with leadership, compliance, and sustainable growth through real business systems. Ashley, thanks for coming on the show. As always, we like to start with your backstory. How did you get into this space? How did you go from stay-at-home mom to med spa owner? I know it's probably a long story. We probably do a whole episode on that alone, but.
Oh, right. I could go into it for days. Really, I fell in love with skincare after living in Japan for 2 years. That's what really drove me to kind of figure out, like, okay, what are they doing anti-aging wise? And coming back to the States and being a young stay-at-home mom, I was like, all right, I need to invest in myself a little. And kind of dabbling in it a little, I realized that our industry that we're in now, there just weren't a lot of med spas that were owned by non-providers. And I always wondered why. So wanted to, do something after being a stay-at-home mom, and I loved the industry and it was really interesting. So I just dove right in.
And in the interim here, you worked at other practices, right?
Yeah. So
What's the timeline on that?
um, my husband owned a phys med practice in South Carolina. So when we originally started dating, um, I was a stay-at-home mom and he was, working full time and running his practices. And he was like, Ash, do you need something to do? Because my kids are in school now. And I was like, yes, please. So I started very slow, like remotely, and I was helping with like insurance payments and then really just kind of learned the ins and outs of his business and kind of worked up from there. So did that for, I would say, like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then he sold his practices. And I was like, wait, now what? Now what am I going to do? Yeah.
And so making that jump, that's obviously a big decision. And I think
Yeah.
we've talked about so many coming in as a non-provider. I think you see a lot of
Hmm.
people that start as providers. One of the
Right.
advantages they maybe have is they can start really small, right? Like in a small office, just doing their own thing,
Right.
hire when
Yeah.
they need help. You had to come in with a little bit more of a business plan to make sure that this was something that was going to work and take off and not just flounder. And I know for a lot of people, if they come in as a non-provider, you got to have that stuff a little bit more dialed in. Your X's crossed, your I's dotted, your T's crossed. So,
Hmm.
what did that initial planning look like for you as you decided to make this jump of actually starting your own med spa?
So originally, I had met someone who lived local who was a doctor, and he was kind of thinking about getting into the industry as well, as far as like opening a practice and being like a medical director. And he didn't know he was an orthopedic spinal surgeon. And so he didn't really know too much about the industry. He just knew that that was something that really intrigued him. So I went to him originally to be the medical director. But once I started doing my research, understanding the laws in Florida and like what I guess was compliant and what the Florida statutes say, he couldn't be the medical director. So I kind of had to like really revisit my business plan and figure out like, okay, now what am I going to do? Well, we ended up still going into business together. Really, his location was just a shared location that we both used. And I had to find a medical director that was plastic surgeon or derm, because that's our laws here in Florida. Um, it kind of changed a little bit for me as far as how long it was going to take to get like up and running, because then going from that, I had to then find an injector, which was a little bit tricky. Being a new company and finding someone who was willing to kind of like risk it and jump in with me and like figure it out as we go along. But um, I was lucky I was able to find someone, and really she was a huge help. starting it up and just being able to ask like the medical questions, because there were things that I didn't truly understand. But then at the same time, um, it was kind of interesting because there were a lot of things for her that she didn't know, being a provider on the business end. So it was just kind of a learning process. It worked out. It was just me and her for the first, I would say, 6 months, just the two of us, and then I just slowly grew from there.
So a few questions. I know even like the
Yeah.
practices that are big and established, one of the biggest challenges for everybody is how do we
Hmm.
find good injectors? Most med spas, 60% of the lifeblood of your business is injectables. The person sitting in that seat is critically important to the
Yeah.
success of the business. I know sometimes you luck into it. How did you find the person that you started with, and how did you have confidence they were the right person?
So when I posted the job on Indeed, one of the things was to see their background, how long they've been injecting. But then I also asked a lot of my local reps, hey, have you worked with this provider? Have you done trainings with her? I got the trainings that she had done. And then I kind of just from there would focus on really like the patient base. I wasn't too worried about how many patients she was going to bring onto a new practice, because really it's hit or miss with an injector. If they, if they leave or go somewhere new, whether or not those patients are going to follow, that really wasn't and still isn't a concern when I'm hiring someone. It was really more word of mouth, kind of a lot of what the reps had to say, that she's worked with, and just, really it just took a little bit of like research on my end and digging to see if it was going to be a good fit. But really, when you bring any injector on to your practice as an owner, like you need to fully trust them and feel confident in what they have learned and what they're able to do, and what you hire them for before you can really like say, okay, like we're going to do this and bring them on as a provider. Like you really have to do your research.
Yeah. So for you, it's a combination of research, references, and then that gut
Yeah.
check. Does this person, like, do I think this person's going to check the boxes that my clients are going to be really excited about this person serving as their provider?
Yeah. In our initial like meeting, I wanted to be very casual. So it wasn't like interview. It was like, hey, let's just see if we click, because we were going to be doing a lot of work together. I'm like, let's just like get together, do an initial, meet. And we did. So it was nice because it was hard in the beginning. I did interview quite a few injectors, and there were some that we just didn't click. But her and I did, and it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've gotten a lot of hiring advice from different people on the podcast, and I feel like I've got all these tips floating around in my head right now from we had somebody, there was a guest on the podcast recently, I don't remember who it was, said that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. We've had
Yeah.
people talk about the coffee dates, but I think you just introduced a new one to the thing today, which is you went and bounced this off of the reps that they had worked with. I thought that's really
Hmm.
interesting. That's the first time that's come up. So that's a great little extra research tip for when you're
Yeah.
hiring an injector. How do you recruit somebody that you're going to have high confidence in? That's another little cool thing to add to your tool belt. With
Hmm.
that, was this person already working at a practice?
Yeah, she had been.
So how
Hmm.
did you lure that person away? How did you recruit that person to join forces with you?
So honestly, I had posted the job on Indeed, and I, when I post jobs in Indeed, you'll always get like a ton of people that apply. So I try to fish through those by asking specific questions. So initially, it's just for them to send their resume, and then a reference, like two references, once they have submitted their resume. So, and then I'll kind of reach out. I always will look at the references, and it's always two additional, not just what they have listed on their resume, two additional, because you want to see if they're going to put the extra work in.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's one way. But then also when I have them come in for an interview, is the audio still okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So when I have them come in for an interview, I also have them bring two copies of their resume, a pen, and a pencil. I do that just to see if they can follow specific instructions.
Yeah, the
And when
little
they,
booby trap in the interview in the application process. We do a version of that too. I love that.
Well, it's so important. And I actually learned that from my husband. With him owning medical practices, he had 50 something employees working for him at one point. And when he was interviewing, it got to the point where like he's like, I couldn't do individual, it turned into group interviews. So I would tell them to bring two resumes and then a pen and a pencil. And when they came in, I would have them say, okay, put them here, put your name on both, one in pen and one in pencil. He's like, 75% of them couldn't even follow the flows. I was like, wow, okay, that's smart. So I really took that into like when I hire, and he's not wrong. A lot of
Yeah.
people cannot follow those specific instructions, and those are the people you don't want working for you.
Yeah, if somebody's got that much of a lack of attention to detail or care in that
Yeah.
early stage, that's probably not a good indication. I love that. Good little tips and tricks. I know that's a big challenge for everybody is hiring, recruiting good people. And so I think there's some good little tidbits there. Um, so I know we're digging a little bit on this, but I'm just interested. So you start with you in the injector.
Mm-hmm.
The year that you opened, it was 2021?
2024.
Oh, 2024. Okay, even more recent. So that's even more interesting. So in this period, to be able to grow and sustain and build a patient base, I think has been increasingly challenging. I've talked to a lot of med spas that have been open for a lot longer that are really struggling with momentum. How did you build momentum in terms of acquiring and retaining clients over the last 2.5 years?
I would say word of mouth for sure. Um, Surprisingly, I've never spent a dollar on marketing. Um, when it comes to marketing for your business, we all can pay a ton of money to get new referrals or for them to post on our social medias. I've found that being more authentic in those posts and less frequent really kind of pulls people in a little bit more. So when you do post something, they don't just swipe past it. So reviews, but then we also in the beginning, especially bringing on new devices, we would do community give back days for like our training days. So instead of just kind of having like patients that we already had in our database, we would actually post on different platforms like social media and Facebook groups that we were looking for models for our training day, and it was completely free for those patients to come in for treatment, for pre and post skincare products as well. So we would get probably 8 patients in, or 8 women or men in for those training days, and they would just kind of refer, like they would see from those results from just that one visit that the devices were phenomenal, and they, we would still do the before and afters for them, and they would come back, they would refer family and friends. So that was something that we really 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 um, kind of took pride in, making sure we were giving back to our community, and it wasn't just for patients that had come in previously for a consult, or that we already had in our database.
Yeah, like really cool way to use a loss leader. And you're giving it away to a small percentage of people, but there's this ripple effect that happens that leads to client acquisition a bunch of other areas. I think so often we talked about this a lot, is everybody wants to just like outsource it, hand it off, sit behind a computer and just call and just assume that marketing is done. But being creative, getting out of there in the community, figuring out creative ways to establish relationships and to develop rapport with your local clientele, really important. So those are awesome shares. Thank you. I know something that you're passionate about as a non-provider, and this is kind of when you started researching opening your practice, were all of the things that go into like the regulation angle and compliance. And
Love
this
it.
industry really being a wild west, is this a topic that you're passionate about? Can you talk a little bit about what you've kind of uncovered there and what is on your radar on that front?
Yeah, so I'm not a gray area person. When it comes to the medical industry, I'm not a provider. So anything I do in my practice, I'm like over the top compliant, and I will research, I will ask attorneys, I will whatever I need to do to make sure that I'm always protecting my provider's license. Um, so with that being said, I started kind of memorizing the Florida statutes, and there were so many discrepancies and gray areas that I found when I was reading the statutes based on what the Florida Department of Health said, the Florida Department of Business and Regulation, like in the licensing needed. That it really kind of opened my eyes to this. There's no regulation really in Florida. And that's why I think it's gotten so out of hand, because what the statutes say and what is actually happening are two completely different things.
Where do you think the biggest disconnect is, like on the ground, from what you're seeing practices that are popping up are doing versus what is technically within the bounds of the law and compliant?
I would say your medical director oversight, that's a big one. The statutes say they have to be dermoplastics and they can only oversee one other practice other than their primary location. So if their primary location is not that practice, they have to be dermoplastics and they have to be within 25 miles. A lot of people are like, oh, that had to have changed recently. It hasn't. I think that gray area is what really gets people in trouble, and like it kind of makes it to where it's like, well, you could go this way with it, but you could go that way. And that's not something I really want to play with when it comes to especially your medical director and overseeing your entire practice. So that's one, but two, I would say what's going on inside the practice. It's not, there are so many practices that are performing treatments that they shouldn't be performing treatments. And it drives me insane, because you're one mess up away from really, you could destroy someone's life. And
Yeah.
it's kind of scary when you think about it. Some people might say, oh, well, it's just laser hair removal. You can burn someone. So it's really just looking at those things, and realizing that there's so many med spas, but they're not actual med spas. They're one person in a salon suite, no medical director, but who's regulating it? That's what kind of is the biggest eye opener for me.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's just one of those things. I know every state is different, but this is I'd say second episode in just a month and a half here where we've talked about the things around medical directors and how a lot of people are probably missing what they actually need to be doing in their state to truly be compliant. So I think that's a good call to action for everybody, is double and triple check. Make sure, like Ashley, you know your state's laws and how things work in your state. Don't leave it up for chance that something comes back and bites you. Make sure that you're, like we said, dotting your I's and crossing your T's on that front.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Ashley?
Yeah. The other thing too that I will share with in these med spa groups is I see a lot of people or providers that will post like in Florida med spa groups, like wanting to start my own practice, any recommendations. And there's a lot of people that will respond and it's like, oh, I use this service or I use this provider. And I'm always like, well, wait a second. They're 8 hours away from you. They're not within 25 miles. They're overseeing 15 med spas. And you just start to kind of question, like, well, how is this not being flagged? And I will tell practices, or I'll ask providers too. I'm like, why do you want to open your own? Because for me, I've learned if you do it right, it's not cheap. It's very expensive to own a medical practice. And I think a lot of the times the intention of wanting to open their own from a financial standpoint, I think that's where you can get into trouble, because I don't think people realize how expensive it is when it's done right.
Yeah, for sure. Today's episode is sponsored by Gloss Genius. Gaps in your schedule and patients who don't rebook, tight margins, high fees, and a clunky EMR holding it all together. Sound familiar? You'd love to be growing your practice, but you don't always have the time to figure out your right next move, let alone to sit down and eat lunch. That's why I want to tell you about Gloss Genius, the system more than 5,000 owners use to grow their practice in the background. Unlike others that take more effort on your end, Gloss Genius automatically fills your calendar by getting you more traffic, more reviews, and more online bookings. It finds hidden revenue for you using AI and auto sorts your treatment photos with a HIPAA-compliant EMR your team will actually enjoy using. And Gloss Genius's built-in point of sale doesn't just take payments, it earns you more every day. Rebooking patients at checkout, increasing what they're willing to spend, and saving you thousands with the lowest flat rate and zero hidden fees. Ready to earn more and take back your time with a software that does the work for you? Use code STRATEGIES at glossgenius.com/medspa-success-strategies for 50% off your first 2 months of any aesthetic practice plan. That's code STRATEGIES at glossgenius.com/medspa-success-strategies. Hey, practice owners and marketing managers, if you're looking for more effective and more efficient ways to market your med spa, stand out from the competition, continue to accelerate growth, build a market of one so that people are seeking you out and excited to do business with you and your business, specifically your med spa. You want to grow your share of the pie, get the biggest slice possible of your local market. I wanted to invite you to schedule a one-on-one consulting call with me. If you're doing $1 million or more, I offer these for free. You can schedule this call and we're going to go over all of the detailed blueprints that we provide to our clients, and they're going to be custom tailored to your med spa. So if you just want another idea or another set of eyes on your marketing and advertising efforts, I wanted to invite you to schedule this call. We're going to go over how to establish a brand, how to use short form social media content to stand out from the competition and build know, like, and trust deposits that really create that market of one, how to leverage Facebook and Instagram ads. We're going to share our top performing offers and strategies. We're going to give those away for free. These are data backed from the last 6 to 12 months on what's worked best for our clients in terms of acquisition. And at the end of the day, we want to act as a 3-in-1 provider for our clients. Strategists and consultants first and foremost, handling execution on the digital marketing channels and some offline channels as well, and then giving you the data and the confidence to see true ROI and metrics that back the validity of your marketing investment to aid in your growth. So if you want to schedule that call, go to the show notes below or visit medspamagicmarketing.com. That's medspamagicmarketing.com to schedule your complimentary strategy session with me. You mentioned devices earlier. This is something that's come up on so many episodes. When you're making a device purchase, how do you make sure that that's a responsible financial decision that's going to generate profitability and not just collect dust? I think on our last episode, actually it's an episode that we filmed, but it's not out yet.
Yeah.
With I think it was Allie McAllister. We talked about this, and she said she worked at a couple practices where the plastic surgeon had bought a bunch of devices and they end up in a back room literally just collecting dust. They used them to hang their coats on them. And I've talked to a lot of practices that fall into that trap. How do you ensure that when you're bringing on a device to your practice, that it's a strategic growth tool and not something that's going to end up collecting dust in a back room?
Well, one, I always ask my attorney. I run that device by my attorney, and I'm like, okay, tell me kind of what you know about it, how many lawsuits there have been, with whatever manufacturer it is. So I'll run that by my attorney. I'll do my research, but then I will also, I'm a big believer in not forcing anything. So when the time is right and you start to bring patients on and you build your patient base, you'll know when you start needing to address additional concerns for your patients. Also, if you go into thinking, can I afford this? Is this a right business decision? You're already starting out on the wrong foot. It should never be, can I afford this? It's, what strategy can I put in place to make sure that I generate a good ROI on this device the minute it gets delivered? So there's a lot of things that I talk about in my consulting with practices about when you bring on a device, your strategy starts the day you sign that contract. Waiting until your device gets delivered, however many weeks it is, you're already behind. So that's kind of the biggest and the first step that I will tell practices is do not wait till it gets delivered. Your providers, your entire staff should already know the details and the info and have all the provider FAQs and patient FAQs available to them to know the technology and to learn about this device before it gets delivered.
Yeah. So have a really good sound marketing and promotional plan. Like, I'm going to bring this on here's what I'm going to do to make sure this is a revenue generating. It's something you believe in. You vetted with an attorney to make sure there's no pending issues or excessive complaints about it. You believe in it.
Right.
You think it's a value add to your patients, and then you have a sound plan for how you're going to market it. You don't do a if we build it, they will come kind of thing.
Correct. And my first device, so I was open for 2 months when I started thinking about bringing on a device. And most practices will do like a skin resurfacing, CO2, some sort of laser like that. I brought on Agnes RF, and that is precision RF microneedling. And they thought I was crazy. They were like, this is something that most practices, when they bring it on, they've been open for years. And I was like, well, that makes me want it even more. And they were like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, no, I mean, I saw a live demo and the results, like they did half her face and she looked like she had a facelift. And I was like, I want that. And they were like, no, let's start with just basic RF microneedling. And I was like, no, I want that. So when I got into the room with them, they're like, well, why do you want Agnes? And I was like, it's my grandmother's name. You should have seen the look on their faces. They were like, are you serious? It really is. But I just believed in the device, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. If you believe in it and you really are buying into the fact that this is going to create an exceptional result that's superior to the other devices on the market, like, right. Hey, we all want to be the best. And so if you're going to invest in a device, it's kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about TV commercials. He doesn't really think most businesses should be buying TV commercials, but he thinks the Super Bowl is the best buy in media. It's like, if you're going to do it, go do it in a way that's going to create a home run, hopefully, for your business and your clients.
Right. And we were able to, with that device, do things that other med spas around us could not do. So that was really cool because I was like, well, I don't have the closest med spa to us that had one was 45 minutes away. So I'm not competing like other med spas with an RF microneedling when there's like 80 of them within 5 minutes. This was something that not a lot of practices had. And I really did like that. And it's not a device that is for everyone, for every provider, but it really does phenomenal things. And that's why I was like, this is the one. This is what I'm going to buy. Yeah.
No, I love that. That's good. That's
being in that room with them because they were like, "Are you sure?"
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And then you had you believed in it. You had a great marketing plan. And has that one been successful for you in your practice?
Yeah. So it has. All of my devices, I talk about this with aesthetic management partners. So I was open for 2 months when I brought on Agnes. 3 months later at the owner summit, I was like, okay, well, Agnes did so well and it's been doing well. I ended up bringing on Nuviderm, Scarlet, which is RF, additionally for RF microneedling, Aquafirm. I got Pronox, Oliver Bio, Derma PRP. So really all of these things. And I had only been open for 5 months. So from the time that I invested in that, it took me 9 months to make back what I invested in all of my devices.
Honestly, that's not bad at all, though. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, so you credit that with just having like the things we just talked about, believing in the device, sound plan, and it sounds like one of the other wrinkles for you was, hey, like if I can have something that's really best in market, nobody else around me has it, it's an opportunity to capitalize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt like if I'm able to offer these things, there's a lot of devices that I would say patients and practices have heard of, but then there's some that are not, you don't hear as frequently. I liked that, but I liked the research that was done behind the scenes. So these are, I believe, Korean. I might be wrong. And I think that Dr. An is from Korea, I believe. But I liked the technology behind them. And I really, truly believed in aesthetic management partners too, and the partnership. And I trusted them so much, like from my first purchase to making my next purchase. Working with them it was phenomenal. And I really had the support with them that I've heard other practices complain about with other device companies. And so when I received that support right off the bat with Agnes, I was like, okay, this is the company I'm going to invest in. And it's been great.
Yeah, cool. I love that. Shifting gears a little bit more even to the business side. So coming in as the business person, I know you said you think that you have some advantages. There are some things that make it harder, but there are some things that you thought were real advantages to coming in on the business side. What were those?
Um, so I think when it comes to running a business, there's not enough hours in the day to do what I do, and I couldn't imagine treating patients too. Something is ultimately going to fall off, whether it's the business side or the provider side. So really kind of on the business side coming into it, I was able to really dive into like technology, investing in provider education, which is huge. Um, the girls love to do trainings, and that wasn't always something that was available to them at their previous places. So doing those, also working with AMP has opened up a lot of opportunities for them as well. But coming in on the business side, I really focused on my P&L, knowing my cost per treatment and making sure I had the right like protocols and policies in place in the event that a provider has a question. I can't answer those. I might know the answer, but I'm not a provider. So I have to say, well, what does the policy or protocol say? And they have to refer to that. So having those things in place, um, that's really the benefits I think that I bring to the table. But I do work with a lot of practices that we start, and I'll ask them those questions like, oh, do you have an employee handbook? What are your policies, your protocols, your consents? And they're like, we don't have, those in place. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to
Yeah,
be
so a lot
a
of
lot.
providers come in and they kind of got to build the plane as they're flying it, and it happens in pieces. And you don't know you don't have something until you don't know. From day one, coming in as the business person, I've got my time is dedicated to making sure all of these things are dialed in, and that we don't have to learn after we're doing $2 million a year to figure out how to know our numbers. We're going to start with a foundation that allows us to know those things. When it comes to knowing numbers, what are the things it's amazing the conversations I've had with med spas that are very successful doing $4, $5, $6 million in a single location, or have
Mhm.
5 locations and are owned by private equity, and they don't have any idea of some of these numbers. What are the numbers that you pay attention to that are mission critical for success in your practice?
Cost per procedure is very important. Knowing what you're spending on products, supplies, consumables, every time a patient sits in that chair is so important. I cannot stress that enough, especially in this industry, cash based service. Um, it's not cheap to purchase these products. If you're unsure of what you're paying for them, then there's no way to know if what you're charging for them is covering those costs. Especially if you have other providers working for you, paying them and just kind of not knowing, that's what gets practices into a lot of trouble. So not being able to really track those things is detrimental to your practice.
And what do you use to track those? Like, how do you get that information?
So our EMR system, I will pull reports and we drop them into Google Sheets, and it tells us everything. It's
Nice.
kind of scary. Like my husband wrote algorithms in them. So when I do a discount on something on a treatment, if it drops below a certain percentage of what the practice generates for that, it will turn yellow. And so that's where I know, like, okay, this discount was getting close to like my break even point. Red means that we're in the negatives. So I am able to really determine those numbers based on those reports. Also, with paying my provider, that gets taken into consideration for those treatments.
Yeah, I was going to say, so most of these EMRs, like off the shelf, they don't necessarily have all the information you want, but you've added one layer as they're going into a spreadsheet that's got some custom formulas. So you have like a visual dashboard where you could be on vacation with your family and you look at that and you can go, a green appointment, green appointment, green appointment. Oops, red. What happened there? And at least if you're going to have the red appointment, it was intentional. Like you invited people in for the model call, for example,
Yes.
but you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's not a surprise when you look at the end of the month and go, hey, we're not as profitable as I wished we were. Why?
like, why can I not pay my invoices? Like, that's where it's just like, wait a second, what did we do wrong? Yeah, no, it's very important. A lot of practices, or you'll hear people talking about EMR systems. We switched to Boulevard and I love it. You hear different things, but I'll say, I think it's based on how they build it out, because I am able to generate from a business standpoint every number that I need, and track all of my inventory, purchase orders, everything. So I always question to them, like, well, what is it that when people say, oh, we're switching from Boulevard, I'm like, well, how did you build it out? Because it's I've done a lot of research, and Boulevard has been it's great. I recommend it to all of the practices I work with. I even will help them build their system out just like ours, so that way I can show them how to pull those same reports.
Yeah, I know we've thought about doing an episode on EMRs. Like, the problem is everybody would have like some conflict of interest because there's so many opinions on this and there's so many of them. And I've seen people that switch from one to the other and they think this one's the best thing, but that's a good anecdote there. We'll definitely make sure that that's clipped, because I know people are always asking that question, and even big practices that are established are always wondering if the grass is always greener and figuring out what's on the other side. So a lot of it is, in your opinion, how you set it up and understanding that you're able to go in and connect it in certain ways that fill some of the gaps.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And some of them, when they are built out correctly, they can do everything that you need from a business perspective. But there are other EMRs where, like, I'll ask them, or I met with them before and I'm like, oh, can you pull this report? Or, oh, and they're like, oh, I'll have to get back to you. Instantly, I'm like, nope, it's not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's not. But I also love that you can submit requests to Boulevard and recommend things and I love that, because I'll send recommendations all the time. And I'm like, hey, it'd be really cool if we could do this. And like ePrescribe was one of those things that I was like, hey, I know this is like, we don't deal with insurance and really prescribing isn't something that we do a lot, but it would be cool in the event we need to. 6 months later, they have it.
Yeah.
From when I signed up, and it wasn't based on my recommendations, but it was something in the works. It takes a lot of time to do that, to implement those. Yep. But yeah, I was like, this is great. I'm like, now I don't know what it doesn't have that I would need.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I stress about that with AI now. It's like, if we're going to use an AI tool, I'm like, well, what if this one just adopts the thing we need, and a month from now we spent all this time switching just for this one to adopt it? So yeah, having that flexibility of a company that you know is going to adapt is nice. Hey there, wanted to briefly interrupt the episode to make a quick ask. If you're a podcast listener, it would mean the world to us if you leave a review for the podcast, whether that's on iTunes or Spotify. It's something I hadn't really remembered or thought of asking for, but it does help us show up more frequently so that we can reach more people with the information that we're providing. So it would mean the world to us if you'd leave a review on iTunes or Spotify, if you're listening on audio. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you're in the loop for future videos and you don't miss any of the content that we're putting out. On the business side, this is another topic that's come up on the podcast a lot. How do you balance? Because when we're looking at the metrics that matter, you mentioned your spreadsheet here, we know like average order value or average visit revenue is really important. Retention is really important. With average visit revenue, there's this balance that we're trying to strike between, I don't want my providers to rubber stamp a cheap treatment, right? I don't want somebody to come in and tell my provider they want 20 units of Botox, and so they just give them 20 units of Botox. But there's also this counter concern, which is if I over incentivize sales, my providers can turn from medical educators into salespeople. How do you find that you strike that balance to make sure that you're serving your clients really well, but also incentivizing your providers, and that those things are aligned and not in conflict? Now, that's a hard one for a lot of people to balance.
It is. But you also always have to remember that it's medicine, right? So whether you're injecting someone or you're doing a facial, in this industry, you have to be very careful not to push unnecessary treatment or treatment from a financial gain. So with the providers, I think a lot of practices really fall short with either too much commission, or the way that they've structured like a tier. So like, oh, if you hit this or this. So when it comes to neurotoxin, your provider should be educated on the dosing. Now, if a patient comes in and the provider does the assessment and they're like, nope, I only want 20 units. All of my providers know they have to document their recommended dosage. And if the patient's like, nope, I only want to do 20 and they're only doing 20, it's documented in their notes. Just because we don't want someone to leave and just be like, oh, my results were terrible. Well, this is what was recommended. Um, but I try to have the providers when they're doing a consult with a patient and coming up with, a treatment plan. I try to have my providers stay away from talking about financials with patients. Um, you don't go to your primary care doctor and talk about your insurance coverage with your doctor. That's something that gets handled front office. Same thing when you're delivering a baby, you don't start negotiating with the person that's delivering your child right there. So I think there's that fine line of what we should find acceptable in this industry, and what we shouldn't. And I think the providers have gone to school to learn how to treat patients, and you have to have support staff that can step in and say, this is what was recommended, these are the promotions or the packages that we have, and this is what we're looking at, and then kind of go from there. And if they have additional questions, absolutely, provider pops back in. But when it comes down to talking about the number specific, I don't think it's appropriate for someone to ever negotiate with the person that's injecting them.
Yeah, I feel like we've had a good handful of examples that keep bringing me back to, I think every med spa owner needs to go to their like local dentist, especially if you've got a dentist that's pretty modern and dialed in. The dental offices, for some reason, have all been really well trained in this business side. So they do things like the way that they rebook clients. It's very systematized, right? There's not a disconnect. We're rebooking like in the office chair. We're right there. You're just assuming the next appointment. You're putting it on the schedule. But my dentist, like he's wanted me to get Invisalign and like a mouth guard for grinding. He's not sitting there talking to me about the price points. He's making the recommendation, and then there's a handoff to the person in the office that's going through financials on the other end. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I haven't asked that question, I don't think specifically. I'm curious to what most people do. Do you find that most practices do one or the other, or is it pretty mixed?
Most practices, especially in our area, the providers are the ones going over prices. But I think that's because a lot of the practices that open, it's provider owned, and provider is like the main one doing everything. So it's hard to have anyone else doing those things. Um, so yeah, I find that it's the providers, talking to the patients about the numbers. And yeah, I don't know. It's odd to me as a non-provider. I wouldn't want to negotiate with my medical provider. And
Yeah.
prior to opening my own practice, every time I got neurotoxin, I would I knew what my goals were, and I knew I was going in for talks every 3 months. I didn't try to negotiate with the provider. If I had questions about pricing, I would talk to them up front or ask, hey, any promotions, beforehand. But I never asked my injector that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. How many injectors do you have now in your practice?
5.
This is this is why I think this is a really fun episode for people to listen to. I know there's so many people struggling with growth. To grow from starting the business in 2024 to having 5 providers is really impressive. So I have a couple follow-up questions. One is, how do you make sure that you have consistency? Actually, I've had very different opinions on the podcast. I had Dr. Alex Rohr on the podcast on this. Very successful practice, super reputable. And he sort of lets his providers freelance. They all kind of run their own little business. They do things a little bit different. And he treats it as like a breeding ground for experiments. And then I've had other people that are all the way to the other extreme, where everything, we want it to be systematized and SOPs so that the experience from provider to provider is as consistent as possible. Where do you fall on that spectrum, and how do you manage that?
As far as consistency, regardless of who you're seeing, I want them all to be trained the exact same. The dosing they're trained the same way on that as well. But my girls work together. So I've found that because of the industry and how big it's gotten, injectors compete against one another. And it's really difficult when that happens, because then you have to think about, okay, well, what if they're unsure about injecting filler in this area? Are they just going to do it because they're worried about losing you as a patient?
Well, my girls will literally jump in the room with one another, regardless if it financially benefits them or not, to help out. So I think that's really important. But no, I think having the same kind of experience, regardless of who you're seeing in my practice, is so important. Like I have a provider out. She's one of like our full time. She's out next week. Well, our patients that come in and see her, they're not going to fall off because they've met the other girls here. So it's really,
Huge.
yeah, it's kind of, I think I can compare it to like when I was having, kids and I would go into my OBGYN and, they would want you to see multiple providers because they never knew who's going to be on call when you gave birth. So it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you just are never sure, like if that provider's out, but you need talks because there's an event, you want to make sure that you are confident in the practice, not just that provider.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that. And especially as a business owner, is
Mhm.
you want to create an incentive structure where when you win, your providers win, but you also want to build something that's sustainable so that it's not just a bunch of freelancers where patients come and go depending on who's actually providing service. You want there to be continuity. So this is a
Right.
good segue into like the leadership and team building conversation. You mentioned how important training was and that your team loves that you do a really good job of providing continuing education. What are like the things that you pay attention to from a leadership and a culture standpoint that allow you to build an environment where your providers are not competing against each other. They're not trying to one up each other. They are collaborating and working toward a common goal.
So I'm very upfront and honest with every single one of them when they come on to our practice or when they have. One, I honestly prefer new injectors. Because I feel like they have such drive and motivation and this eagerness to learn, and they're not instantly where, and I'm not saying all injectors are like this, where they're just like, oh, I'll do 1 or 2 days and not team players. They're like, I want to come in and do my thing, but I don't want my patients to see anyone else, but I only want to be here 2 days a week and that's it. So hiring, I really focus on that. And then bringing people in, it they really have to click with everybody. It's not just, me, but the other girls. And I'm very upfront. All the girls make the exact same. So there's no financial gain for me or for me to like recommend to my front desk, hey, why don't you fill this one schedule? They all get compensated the same. And I do that on purpose because I never want anyone to feel like they're getting the short end of it. And it's giving everybody the same opportunities. Um,
Yeah. You don't want
so
there to be internal competition because that's going to create just the natural incentive structure is you create internal competition. That's going to be felt somewhere in the business that's going to create a problem. So how do you
correct.
reduce that?
Um, Really just when they come on, telling them like, hey, we're a team. We're going to work together. This is going to be your support. When you're doing this and you're working in this industry, I can't stress enough how nice it is to have a group of women who get along. So if there is a bad apple in your practice, it'll ruin it for everybody. And you have to cut ties. And I've had to do that, unfortunately. But I have such a great team. The girls are phenomenal. We don't have any of those issues, but also I think it really will decrease the turnover rate in practices too. Um, I look at resumes and I'm like, okay, within the last 5 years, how many different places has this person worked? If it's more than two, you're out.
Yeah.
I am not interested in bringing someone on who's going to be a job hopper that goes from one
I'm the
opportunity.
same way. This is like number one on our
Oh,
screening list.
it drives me insane. I've had people apply with 10 years of experience, but they've been in the last 5 years, 3, 4 different places, versus
Yeah.
someone who literally just got their certification and have done one talks thing. I will hire that person,
Yeah.
especially if they're fit, because they have that eagerness to learn and they want to be a team player. And people are like, yeah, but you're going to lose out on having all these patients follow. I'll tell you what, if anyone leaves our practice, and I've had a provider leave before, it's actually been a year and a half. It was within the first year. I didn't lose any patients.
Yeah, that's a really nice place to be.
Yes, I think building a relationship with your patients and not allowing them to come in and just be another person on the schedule is so important.
How
So,
do you, if everybody, like, there's that big benefit of kind of everybody's in the same category, so they're not competing against each other. Do you have a way, though, to incentivize people that as they're kind of killing it, that they do have upward mobility? How does that work in your practice?
yeah, so because we are a KOL, they have those opportunities. Whoever's here, if there's ever someone who's interested in one of the devices, if they do a training, there's definitely different ways. But also treatment, allowing them to have free treatment or discounted treatment for them, family members. There's certain ways to do that and incentivize them. They get compensated very, very well. I've had no complaints. I will say though, when it comes to the commission, a lot of the practices I have kind of seen in not just my area, but different areas, I always worry about whenever a provider is, commission based or has like an incentive to hit a goal. Are they actually recommending treatment for the patient because that's what the patient needs and that will achieve those goals? Or is it from a financial gain? And
Yeah. So,
that has always concerned me.
so is your structure, you have basically higher base pays for your team, well, good base pays, and less incentive on the, so you feel like that gives you the good balance of people are happy, they're getting paid well, clients don't have like any sort of conflict of interest from how they're being treated, and that it's a good balance to strike.
Yeah, it's a flat amount per, different thing.
Yep.
But no incentive for them to upsell. So also when I do promotions, whether it's stacking energy or if we're doing, I guess like fillers, like buy two, get one half off or buy three, get one free, it will never affect their compensation. And that I think is important too, because so often you'll
Yeah.
see where practices will have a promotion, and if the provider makes a percentage off of what they generate, well, the owner is decreasing what they pay that provider. And I think that, well, one, I don't even know if that's legal unless it says in the agreement, because promotions are internal, like admin things that we market. But to decrease someone's pay without kind of notice or in writing, like you're opening yourself up to a couple different lawsuits. So really, with any promotions, it doesn't affect them at all. So
Yeah, the
they just,
practice eats that portion.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned, so you're, that's like, I like this perspective too of, I think so many people want the shortcut. So they go out and they try to headhunt and find someone that's going to bring their own book of business. We had Mary Beth Hagan. She's with Titan Aesthetic Recruiting on the podcast a couple of times. I think they've made a transition recently. So they might have a different name now. But I said, so what does a practice do if they want to go out and hire somebody that's like experienced? They already have their own book of business. She's like, yeah, don't do that. So the way that you've really relied on is, I'm not going to go try to find the person that's been doing it for 15 years that has a giant book of business. We take the onus on building their book of business with them / for them, and they're going to come in and we're going to hire them to do the job. So when you have somebody that comes in, how do you go about helping them build their book of business? What have been the strategies that have been most effective for you?
So it's experience. Shadowing is huge, and making sure that they're comfortable before they start taking patients on their own. So whether it's with neurotoxins, fillers, lasers, anytime I bring a new provider on, I fly someone in to train on our lasers. I'm not a trainer. My providers, they're not trained to train my new providers coming on. So I bring someone in to get training specifically from where I purchased the devices, and it's the same person every time. His name's Alfonso. He's phenomenal. I'm obsessed with him. And he comes in and he'll train the girls or whoever, but also you give them the opportunity, the other providers, that, well, hey, he's going to be in here. Do you also want to kind of sit in on this and get more training on this device or ask more questions? So just making sure that they're trained. And then once they're trained, this is going to sound scary, but I make them inject me, because I will probably be the scariest person that they'll ever inject.
High pressure.
Yeah, You're like,
Yeah.
uh-oh. So I make sure that I allow them to inject me. Now, I don't do a lot of fillers. I'll have them do my talks. I'll allow
Yeah, but what
them
a
to.
great credibility pass point to be able to tell your clients and patients that are coming in, I let her inject me.
Everybody asks me that though. They'll say, well, who do you recommend? Well, all of them. And they're like, well, which one? I'm like, no, no, no. I don't think you understand. I would trust any of them. They've all, done my talks or they practice lasers on me. So I
Yeah.
think that's big in practices, like being able to say like all of them and not just like, oh, well, just, this one, she does it, frequent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I do really pride myself on that. If someone asks me, like, okay, well, who does it? They all do. They all have. And then even training on lasers, same thing. It can be scary when you're first learning a laser and a device, but I also feel like that's the opportunity for them, for me to also tell them, because I've had it done, like, okay, the pressure is good, or maybe change your technique on this, because it's not often that they're going to get that same feedback. Same thing with facials.
Yeah.
Like, so it's trial and error, but just feeling confident in whoever you bring on to your practice.
And so is it fair to say you're really playing the long game with these people? You're not like bringing someone on being like, this person's going to make me a bunch of money. You know that it's an investment. You're not making money off them in the short term. You're training them. You're getting them up to speed. And then it's a slow progression for them building their book of business typically.
For sure. Anyone that ever joins a practice, whether you've been injecting or you're new, it's going to take time to build your patient base. Not all of your patients are going to follow, especially if you've gone around multiple places. It'll get annoying for the patients to have to follow that injector. But yeah, I'm fully aware that it's going to take time, but I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah, I love that willingness to play the long game.
I would rather bring someone on that really meshes well with our practice and is brand new and it maybe takes her 6 months to have a full day. It's cool, fine. Versus bringing someone on who's, just not a good fit, even if they bring 100 patients a week. That'll just ruin the dynamic.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm probably getting a little in the weeds on this, but so for the new, I'm just curious. So like the new provider that comes on, you train them, you're getting them up to speed. They're starting to build are they full-time, all of your providers, or do they have different schedules? And so what are they doing if their books are not full those first 6 months? Are they transitioning into the schedule? What does that look like
Yeah,
logistically?
kind of transitioning. So it's really based on their needs too and the needs of our practice. So if I need someone, we have multiple rooms. I don't need to fill every room every hour of the day. That's not my goal. It's to offer services to our area to patients at an affordable price where they can trust, rely us, and they know that everyone's trained properly. So it's really based on what that injector is looking for. So I have one right now that's like my full time, and the other ones kind of build their schedule based on their availability, whether they have kids and they want to stay home and they have to, balance the two. So it's really based on them. I'm really easygoing when it comes to those types of things where they're like, I have one that's she's been home with her kids all summer. I'm a mom, I get it. They're only young ones, so I fully support that. So it's just kind of adjusting where is needed.
Yeah.
And but they're always willing to step up and help out if someone needs time off or anything like that.
Yeah, I love that. Again, you're not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. You're finding these opportunities to work with people in a way that makes sense for them and your business and to make it as seamless and effective as possible. You mentioned their pricing. I know this is a hot topic. Everybody wants to charge more, and it's very easy to get more clients when you charge less. How do you go about trying to balance your pricing strategy so that you're not pricing yourself out of the market where people aren't choosing you, but you're not always in a bidding war? How do you think about pricing strategy in general?
Well, there's a reason why I haven't brought laser hair removal on yet, because that is probably one of the number one things in our area that has just the price. Everyone competes against each other, and it gets lower and lower and lower. And investing in a device that's actually going to give patients results and it's good technology, it's expensive. And I know that if I bring something on like that, I'm not going to charge those prices. So That's for one. Two, we have people call all the time and they're like, oh, well, so-and-so's doing that, down the street at this much per unit. Okay. If you come to us, you're coming to us for our providers, what we offer as a practice. And it's not always about the cheapest. We have a lot of patients that come in that went to the cheaper places and now they need help. So when it comes to competing, I'm not a fan. I think that you have to really start to question. We all pay the same amount. You have to start to question, especially toxin fillers. If they're charging less than what it cost you, that's a red flag.
Yeah, I just had an experience with an AC company, and I had another company come out because I just wasn't confident what the other people were telling me. And the second company came out and they gave us a whole plan. They did this analysis and they're like, hey, you actually just have the wrong size unit that was installed. I was like, we just got that unit installed. And I threw the advice into Google Gemini and I was like, who's telling me the truth here? And it turns out the second company was. And anytime you're cutting corners and trying to make things cheaper, it comes at the expense of the client in some way, right? Your facilities, your product, your providers, the quality of providers. Like there's something that's a corner that's being cut. So is your general pricing strategy is you want to be like moderate, reasonably priced, and do a great job? Kind of that, is that the general pricing strategy for things like toxin across the board? Or are you top of market? What does that look like?
I would say as far as injectables, we're competitive. Like we're not top and we're not bottom.
Yeah.
But we stay at the same price. Now we'll run promotions around like the holidays or things like that. But we don't, nothing too crazy with the injectables. Like I've seen just wild. Like recently I've really tried to limit any promotions and specials because the product, it's expensive. Toxin filler will never be the only thing that you provide that will keep the doors open. It's too expensive, especially if you're buying it from the places you should be. So I really don't mess with those too much. And then devices, that's where I kind of have figured out a way to offer promotions for patients without decreasing our revenue. So a lot of practices will run promotions on a single device or treatment. So RF microneedling, they'll say half off one, a session or a package of 3. Well, instead of reducing the amount you generate in revenue, stack energy. Buy RF microneedling, add Nuviderm, laser skin resurfacing, and you don't have to decrease your revenue at all. You just add that device. They're already numb. It takes you 5 extra minutes, and the patients are getting double value of treatment and addressing multiple concerns in one visit. So that's where, when you start to structure your packages based on the patient's goals and outcomes versus kind of like, how can I beat this other med spa? When you start to look at it that way, that's where you're really going to see your revenue increase versus, okay, well, why is it getting less and less and less? You're never going to, if you can put on price, you'll never win.
Yeah, it's the relationship and trusting the provider and then letting it fall from there. If you're overly commoditized, it's just a race to the bottom. And I like that too. Like we always talk about, you don't want to get people addicted to discounts. You don't want your existing patients to know they can always get Botox at $3 a unit if they just wait an extra couple weeks. And so being selective about how you do that and where you do that in your business is really important. Alicia, I think this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for the time. I want to make sure that we have all of your links to consulting business, the med spa, all of those things in the show notes. But for the audio listeners, can you tell people where they can find you? We'll make sure all of these things are in the show notes on YouTube and the podcast platforms too.
Yeah. So our links on, let me see, they're all listed out. Our links for Lux, for my med spa, it's at Lux Med Spa Sarasota. Let me see. Hold on. I got to zoom in. Hold on.
I had the website up too.
Oh, do you? Okay. Yeah, our Instagram link is at Lux Med Spa SRQ. My consulting is at Lux_Wink. And then my personal is Ash_Winkler, 2 H's.
That's awesome, everybody. If you want to work with Ashley, you just want to follow her, see what she's up to, learn from somebody who's been really successful in growing and establishing a business in a competitive market over the last 2 years, definitely worth the follow. And Ashley, thank you so much. We look forward to hopefully having you on again sometime soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. This podcast is a production of Med Spa Magic Marketing. If your med spa or aesthetic practice is in need of digital marketing services, help with advertising on Facebook, Instagram, Google, lead generation, and booking more appointments, please visit medspamagicmarketing.com.